Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's with great pleasure and privilege that I sit before you today, everybody in the audience and everybody at home watching. We welcome you to our council meeting budget workshop today, this Saturday, August 12th, and the time is now 3:30. I call this meeting to order. We're going to start with an invocation by our interim city manager, Ms. Diana, followed by the pledge by Council Member Cynthia Carrasco.
If everyone will rise and bow their head in prayer. Dear wise and loving Father, we thank you for everyone who is gathered here today. We thank you for your many and abundant blessings. We thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our calling, for sustenance, and for our friendship. We thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. I pray this afternoon for our mayor and for our city council and for those of us that are gathered in this room. I'm asking that you graciously grant us wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times. I ask that you grant us confidence in what is good and what is fitting. I ask that you grant us the ability to work together in harmony. And I ask you to grant us personal peace in our lives and joy in our tasks. We pray for the workshop set before us today. We thank you for all that you do for us, and we pray in your most blessed name. Amen.
Amen. If we could all face the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we'll listen to citizen comments. Keep in mind, when you come up, it's a 3-minute limit, and address the council. No questions will be answered or commented on, and you are free to come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and we'll start with Mr. Atkinson.
Council, thank you for allowing me to come up. I've just been going through the budget that y'all are working on some, and just some observations that I wanted to call the attention to. That basically, I've been watching this thing for quite a while, and Alice is in a swirl, circling the drain. We've got to be in a survival mode. The good thing is that most all of Alice's problems are in the general fund. And the balance of the general fund is projected at $1.5 million, which would be about a month and a half of reserves. The muck fund and the golf course fund are both a little bit negative, but they're just a sideline issue to what the real problems are. Thank goodness the debt fund has got a projected balance of 1.2 million, the solid waste at 2.3, and the utility fund at 4.6. They appear to be reasonably okay. There's something I don't really understand about a lot of that, but maybe the solid waste fund is supposed to have a certain reserve for replacing closing pits and all that. I don't know. But anyway, at least they're not in the red too. On October the 1st, 2016, which hadn't been very long ago, the Alice General Fund had a healthy $9,800,000 in the beginning fund balance, which represented 7.5 months of operating reserves. 2 short years later, your proposed 2018 budget is proposing to possibly adopt a budget with a projected general fund with a $1.5 million ending fund balance, or only 1.5 months operating reserves. The minimum recommended projected general fund balance should be no less than $3 million, or 3 months of operating reserves, calculated by $10 million a month times 3 months is $3 million. Therefore, in order to have the recommended 3 million reserves, you need to cut an additional 1.4 million out of the general fund expenses, calculated as follows: 3 million, 3 months, less 1.5 million projected balance equals 1,000,004. The shortage of the ending balance, it'll require to get you up to 3 months reserves. Your current proposed 2018 general fund budget is projecting revenues of $10,999,000 and expenses of $12,130,000, which is a deficit of $1,000,001, spending in excess of income. Now, I know technically that's not a deficit balance, but it is a deficit spending. Bottom line, in order to wind up with an ending general fund balance of 3 million and 3 months reserves and a balanced budget, all you have to do is cut $2.6 million expenses, calculated as follows: 1.4 shortage in ending balance, plus 1.1 spending deficit equals 2.6 million. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Okay. At this time, we have no other citizen comments. Any announcements from council will be heard at this time. Ms. Carrasco? Ms. Garza?
No.
Mr. Crisp?
None at this time.
Ms. Moran?
None at this time, thank you.
Okay. All right, so we'll proceed to agenda item number 3, review and discussion of the 2016-2017 fiscal year revised city budget and 2017 and 2018 fiscal year proposed City of Alice budget. At this time, we're going to review it and counsel, and for the integrity of our staff that's here on a Saturday and the time, I'm requesting that we kind of goal it at 3 hours, hopefully ending by 6 or 6:30, so we could keep our questions precise and discussion to a minimum and let our staff present to us today.
I appreciate that, Mayor. And item 4 will be the opportunity for us to continue to set future workshops, and we have some ideas there to help streamline this process. Thank you for having us here on a Saturday afternoon. I'd like to begin this afternoon by kind of walking you all through from where we were at the meeting on Wednesday and the work that we've done to determine where we need to head. Council has proposed the tax rate at 53 cents, which is no increase from last year to this year. We have gone back and we have plugged that number in so that we are able to update the budget book with that reflected projection. When the proposed budget was presented to council on August 2nd, the anticipated effective rate that we used to calculate was 0.577 at a 90% collection for property taxes. We, at that time, were anticipating a general fund deficit of $762,376. This can be found on page 4 of your budget book, on the bottom right-hand corner. That anticipated rate was going to give us a balanced consolidated budget overall. And I'm going to be flipping a lot between page 4 of your budget book and Roman numeral number 19, which is the consolidated fund summary. We have taken the 53-cent proposed tax rate and recalculated our budget. And the deficit in the general fund is now at approximately 1.1 million. And the consolidated budget deficit is approximately 378,276. We viewed historical data for collections for property taxes and revenues and feel comfortable at raising that collection rate with this proposed tax rate of 53 cents to a 95% collection rate. In doing that, the deficit in the consolidated budget is now $161,525. And the general fund deficit is at $923,901. The general fund, as we have stated before, is the most important fund when it comes to operations. And we need to concentrate and focus our efforts on that particular fund to find as many expenditure cuts as possible in order to meet the goals that were outlined to the council with the transmittal letter, which is starting to replenish the fund balance in there, because there is several factors that come into the fund balance in your general fund. Most importantly, we need to have at least our 3 months of reserves. We have handed out a couple of pages to the council, and what I'm going to do right now is kind of brief you all so that you have an understanding of how much has been cut from the general fund from 2015 to proposed 18. On your chairs in front of you, if you will please pull out the legal size sheets that look like this.
One second.
Yes.
Ms. Pat, do we have any rulers? I know they're lined, but
I had some, I'm not sure where they're at right this moment.
We can have staff step out and go get some.
okay, thank you. Yeah, you know what? I'll just fold a sheet of paper. We'll be fine. That's exactly what I told you.
And we can hold on while we
She
get
can't
some.
hear you.
Well,
that
it's
well.
not my
Oh.
age, it's just that I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, is it the mic? Maybe we need to get the mic closer to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's a
Okay,
little-
give me a moment.
We didn't have these up for the public to
No,
see.
ma'am, we've been working very diligently at trying to get this information. We, as we progress through it, we'll start to, if you all would like, we can think about putting this on the website in addition to the proposed budget.
Absolutely. That
Okay.
would be great.
Can you all hear me better now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you'll have to bear with us because workshops are kind of a different atmosphere and a different setting. They're not as formal as meetings. So the goal today is to have conversation back and forth with one another and start to set out the goals to streamline this process. Mr. Ramos and I and finance staff have been working since Wednesday evening, and I felt it was important to start here so that everyone has an understanding of how much work has been put into concentrating on the reduction of expenditures in the general fund.
Very good, thank you.
Should we wait for the rulers, or
I'm good.
you're good for now? Okay,
Hey, make me one of those.
perfect. So your first sheet, at the top, you'll notice on the far left-hand side, general fund, and the first section is a summary of revenue. You'll have a column labeled 2015 actual and 2016 actual. These are actual numbers from those budgets. As you move to the right, you will notice two columns that are shaded in gray that show a dollar change and a percent change. That first column is the difference between 15 to 16. As you continue to move to the right, you will see 2017 adopted and 2017 revised. The next two columns that are shaded in gray are the dollar change and percentage change from 16 to 17. You will then see 2008 proposed with two additional columns for dollar change 17 and percent change 18. That is the difference between revised 17 and proposed 18. The far right-hand columns is a totality of the beginning of 15 to proposed 18. You will notice on the bottom that revenues between 15 to 18 have dropped by $4.7 million, which is equating to a percent change of approximately 29.79%. And that's revenues only. The next section of this document is going to outline expenditures. They are broken up by every department in the general fund. On the very bottom of your sheet, you will notice to the far right-hand side, from 15 to proposed 18, expenditures in the general fund have been cut by $8,314,995, which is approximately 41% reduction in expenditures. On the very bottom, you are going to notice the excess of revenues over expenditures. We are at a very critical point in our government where the continuation of tough decisions are going to have to be made. I wanted to be able to portray to the council from 15 to 18 the level of cuts in expenditures that have been already taken into account. This does include the 10% reduction in pay that non-civil service personnel in the general fund were subjected to last year. It also includes the reduction in force to the general fund. And you'll have to forgive me because I can't remember off the top of my head how many positions were for to the general fund, but overall in totality, all funds was 29 positions. For non-civil service personnel, that's approximately a third of your workforce. Attributed to that as well were focuses on cuts to overtime, focusing on cuts to travel, focusing on cuts to training, office supplies, everything and anything in between. The budgets that are in 2018 are very minimal expenditures that are needed to continue operations. The next few pages are going to break down the same process for the other funds. The second page is solid waste operations. And from 15 to 18, they have lost revenues equating to approximately 29% reduction, totaling $1.266136. Expenditures have been cut by approximately 9%, equating to $285,782. The solid waste fund is a, Mr. Ramos, the thoughts at my mind. It is a enterprise fund, and it is doing very well. So while there are some additional things that we can continue to do here, it is good that the decision was made by prior councils and administration to move this out of the general fund so that it is self-sustaining. The third page is going to be your utility enterprise fund. And again, this is a doing well. We have been, Mr. Ramos and I and staff have been going through this fund extensively, and we have identified some areas that we will be discussing with you all either today or when we meet to discuss this particular department, areas of revenue streams that need some attention. The next page is going to be your airport fund. This fund has been operating in a deficit for some time. From 15 to 18, it has lost approximately 80% or more of its revenue. And while that seems like a large percentage, it equates to $206,744. The expenditure cuts out there have been down to bare bones as well. We did move one employee from the airport fund into the general fund as part of the process of streamlining operations. We had a light equipment operator out at the airport fund. We moved them under streets to better streamline those processes. and service the areas that needed to be serviced. The next page is going to be your golf course fund. Again, this is a quality of life service that we offer to our residents. It has been operating in a deficit for some time. We have reduced expenditures out there in excess of 26%, or about $125,785. They were subject to the reduction in force. They lost 2 employees and have still managed to maintain as best as possible with the challenges they have the operations at the golf course. And the last sheet is going to be the multi-use complex. Like I mentioned before, the historical data that we have for this particular fund is still in its infancy. We are constantly focusing every day on streamlining processes over there, looking for additional revenue streams. And now that the facility is going to have essentially a full year's worth of data, we will be better able to project revenues and also staffing for that facility. In your packets as well, we have included a fee schedule. And it's the document that looks like this: City of Alice Schedule of Fees as of 10/1/16. Our fee schedule is what sets out the additional revenue streams that we look at when proposing budgets. We have set aside and we have asked departments to go through this and identify areas where we may need to be increasing certain types of fees. We have come to the realization that there are some areas that the fees may be set too low, and we are not essentially breaking even. These fees, for example, would be at in utility billing. One of the ones that we are looking on is the tampering fee. Tampering is when an individual makes the decision to go to their water meter and they tamper with it. It's not something that everyone is going to do. That resident is making that conscious decision to do that. It does cost time and money for staff to correct that problem. And we have had Marisela from the utility department do a thorough analysis of how many of these are happening per year and how to defer this from happening and raising that fee so that it is essentially even to what it's going to cost us to go out there and replace it. We're also looking at the library. We do interloan libraries, which means they can request a book from another library. We charge a small fee for that, and the postage is costing us $3. We're losing about $2.50 for each one of those books. So we're looking at those fees as well. The budget process is a process that's ever going and ever changing. Staff is constantly working and focusing on it. One of the interesting things that I wanted to point out to you all as well is there is a sheet that looks like this, and it's 2005 actual compared to 2018 proposed. There had been a member of council who wanted us to look at the numbers in '05 compared to the proposed numbers in '18, and this is where it is. So in 2005, I want to remind you all that the minimum wage was $5.15. It is now $7.25, I believe. There has also been an inflation rate that we've been able to determine of 25.4%. Even given those factors, the proposed numbers are still under the actual numbers in 2005. Again, painting for the public and for the city council that there has been a lot of work put into this in cutting expenses down to basic operating needs. As I mentioned at the beginning, when we were able to plug in the proposed tax rate and adjust the collection rate for property taxes, the last page, or was actually the first page of your packet, is a bar graph that looks like this. On the combined funds, like I mentioned in that first little section at the top, we have a deficit of $161,525 collectively amongst all the funds. The next section is the graph of that, and it indicates the decrease in expenses. We have gone and identified some areas that immediately we were able to determine were probably some good areas to start focusing on, and you'll have to give me a moment while I find that sheet. Vanessa, do you have the sheet with the proposed? Thank you. In the general fund, we have found an additional $200,513 worth of cuts. This is additional cuts to meals, travel, registration, office supplies, and minor equipment. The majority of that is coming from proposed positions that were already in the proposed budget. We had included 1 additional patrol officer and 5 additional firefighters in the proposed budget that was given to you. In speaking with the 2 chiefs, they're of the notion that we can lower the 5 firefighters to 2, removing 3 firefighters, and removing the 1 extra patrol officer. In the utility fund, we were able to find another $7,893 worth of cuts in operating supplies, minor equipment, and in reducing some of the temporary staff out there. And in the airport, an additional 175, which is totaling to 208,581 overall. This is the work that has been done from Wednesday until today, but there's still a lot of work ahead of us.
What was the total again?
208,581 collectively amongst all the funds, and in the general fund alone, 200,513. One of the small challenges that we have faced is, I mentioned to you all on Wednesday that Ann, our financial advisor, was supposed to be here. I hadn't checked my email, and I didn't realize that she was actually sending someone to us that evening, and they had an accident on their way to the meeting. Everybody is fine and everyone is okay, but we have not had an opportunity to get with her. We will be getting with her on Monday to start the process of looking at how much of the 53 cents is going to go to M&O and how much of that 53 cents is going to go to INS. As you all may recall, we have a little bit of a fund balance in our debt service, which is a wonderful thing to have. One of the priorities that I outlined to the council was, number 1, the ability to pay down our debt. In discussions with Ann, what we are going to look at is perhaps taking a little bit of that excess fund balance and maybe lowering the INS rate by a little bit and moving it to M&O. So we'll have more in our maintenance and operations to help maybe offset some additional challenges to the general fund.
Do we know what that is, more or less? Does she give?
We
a rough
have
estimate?
some proposed numbers that staff has looked at. We want her to confirm that. I can share them with the council, but they may change at this point, if you all are okay with that.
Okay.
Give us an idea.
Sure. For 2017 or 2000, where we are right now, the M&O was 0.299134, and the debt service was at 0.230866 for a combined tax rate of 53 cents. What we have current, yes, sir.
What was the debt?
0.230866. The preliminary calculations that we have that we would need confirmation and discussion with her on, we are looking at perhaps 0.305880 for maintenance and operations and 0.224120 for debt service, for a combined total rate of 53 cents. There may be some additional slight movement, but we will have to discuss and confirm with her. And I'd still, like I mentioned, plan to bring her back to another meeting so that she can further her presentation of where we are and how we're continuing our forward forecasting into the future. Council, or a few members of council, had asked us to look at retirement. And we have gotten with TMRS, and they have given us some scenarios to consider there. And I'm going to pull off my city manager hat and put on my HR hat right now to kind of discuss with you all how these numbers would impact not only the budget, but also perhaps impact staffing. TMRS offers several options when it comes to a city adopting its benefits. The contribution rate for an employee can be 5% or 7%. The city right now has 5%, and that means that for every employee who meets the definition for TMRS retirement, 5% of their gross wages are taken and put into their TMRS account.
That's optional, right?
No, sir.
Okay,
It is
so-
mandatory. It is mandatory.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, 5%. The second part of that equation is the city's match, and there are several options. There is a 1-to-1 match, which means that for every $1 that an employee puts in, the city will contribute $1 when they meet the criteria for retirement. The second option is a 1-to-1.5 match, which means that for every $1 an employee puts in, the city will match 1.5. And the third option, which is the maximum, is called a 2-to-1, which means for every $1 an employee puts in, the city will match 2. We are currently at that rate, the 2-to-1 match. We have pulled numbers for a 1.5 and a 1%. The way that this change, if council was to look at wanting to do something like this, would happen January 1st of the year. It is not something that could be done as of 10/1. TMRS requires that it be effective 1/1. And it would be done by ordinance. And the council would have an ordinance that would pass this. With the reduction of the 3 firefighters and the 1 patrol officer, in the general fund, the savings on a 1.5 would be approximately $144,159. And on a 1-to-1 match would be $259,781. Factoring in the other departments, solid waste, utilities, and golf course, the savings on a 1-to-1.5 would be $191,421. And on a 1-to-1 match would be $344,949.
I'm sorry, again?
$344,949. While those numbers are significant, I do want to advise the council and let them know of some of the possible scenarios that could come from implementing a change like this. One of the challenges that we have had in attracting personnel from other cities was just the fact that we were not at the 7% match, or the 7% contribution rate. The 2-to-1 was the highest, and they were okay with that. If the council was to consider lowering that, we may have difficulty attracting outside personnel. But more importantly, your personnel who is already on staff, those that are toward the end of their career, it may not have such a big impact on. This is not a change that goes back retroactively and changes anything. What it means is as of 1/1, the matching changes, and the projections for those that are mid-career will change significantly. Those that are not vested, meaning 5 years or less of service, it's not such a big deal. A large portion of your personnel right now are in the midst of their career, which means they're between 10 and 20 years. And the scenarios would be considerable in carrying out those projections. It is something to consider, and the numbers are there, but I would strongly recommend and encourage we have a long conversation about this, and that it perhaps be one of the last things that we consider.
What is the number of employees that it would impact that are in the 10 to 20 years? How many employees would be impacted?
Between rough estimate, without my spreadsheets in front of me, probably about 80.
80?
80 out of your 240.
What about those that have 20 or more?
That I didn't look at too much, but I can come back to you with those projected scenarios. And I didn't even think about bringing my laptop with those figures in front of me.
Look them up quickly.
And if the council does wish to consider this, I can arrange for a member of the TMRS travel team to come in front of council and answer any additional questions or scenarios that they would like run.
So just so I can understand how it would impact the employee,
Yes, ma'am.
those that are in the 10 to 20 years
Mhm.
would be the ones that would get impacted the most?
Yes, ma'am.
Because the change would occur effective 1/1.
Correct.
For example, if we went to the 1-to-1, they would be impacted immediately.
Yes, so for those that are mid-year, and we'll use 10 because 10 is in the middle of 20. When they're calculating your retirement estimate, they are taking into account the 2-to-1 match already. You essentially would be cutting that in half. So for them to catch up, they would have to find another way to invest in an alternate retirement plan to be able to meet the goals of their retirement for whatever age it was that they were looking at.
Do we offer any other alternate plans?
We do
for-
offer a supplemental 457B plan.
Yes.
That is not mandatory. It is completely voluntary, and there is no match from the city.
Do we know how many employees are currently participating?
We have quite a few. Last year, when the reductions in pay happened, it was one of the first things that most employees dropped.
What about those in the 20-plus? How would they get impacted?
It's not so much of an impact because they are closer to retirement than those that are, in the 10-year range. I'm afraid what it might do is make them make the decision to go. And that would mean that you're letting an employee who we have invested in and that industrial knowledge walk out the door with them.
But that's a choice.
That would be a personal choice that they make.
Now, the portion that's affected is only during the time period that it's in place, correct?
That is correct.
So if this was circumstantial, say, council decides to evaluate this plan and says, hey, we're going to have to do something for 2 years, and then we'll reevaluate it in 2 years. It only affects that 2-year period.
That is
It's not
correct.
affecting everything
No, sir.
before or once it's reinstated.
It would be-
The way that some of this starts sounding
It sounds
is
like
like
we're taking away.
like it's
Forever,
yeah,
permanent.
it's permanent, or it affects everything that happens before there or thereafter. But it's only during a duration.
It's
that
only
we
during the
implement
duration, and the
for
process
the 1 year,
would-
2 year, whatever that it would take effect.
The reverse to that, however, would be the impact that would have to the funding for the contribution rate to the city. So, for example, right now, the contribution rate that we use to fund TMRS is, give me a 9 point something, yeah, give me a minute. 9.34. These reductions, we're going to bring that down to 6.41 on the 1.5 to 1 and 4.06 on the 1 to 1. And you'll have to forgive me because I'm working it through my head. To catch it up, it may be that instead of the 9.34 that we currently are, it may be significantly above that. And TMRS can work those projections for us. I can have them look at if we lower it for 3 years and then determine to go up based on the population and the contributions, can you project to us what that contribution rate will be? They can run that for us. They have individuals on staff who can look at that. Yes.
Well,
Mr. Ramos.
we need a mic for him.
No, it's okay. As you have more people retiring, that contribution rate goes up. So that unfunded portion, it needs to be covered by the employees, current employees, so it raises your contribution up as more people retire.
Which we could potentially end up doing with that move also.
But we can certainly get with TMRS and have them run those scenarios and look at it. And it would be the same process. You would, by ordinance, adopt it to change it to wherever you want, effective 1/1 of that following fiscal year.
I think that'd be a good idea. Just, I know this is just phase one, but the idea is we have to cut from somewhere, and do we cut from the back end or do we cut from the front end? That's all we're trying to evaluate here, and I think it would be a good idea for that to be presented to us.
Absolutely.
Just to clarify, Diana, we wouldn't be taking, so, for example, they have this retirement already established, whatever it is, I don't know, for example.
$50,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we choose to do this January 1st, we're not touching that 50 grand.
No, ma'am.
It would just
It would be
okay.
future going forward.
Okay, so
Yes.
that wouldn't be touched.
And that is a common misconception
Mm-hmm.
amongst staff, as it's been discussed before, and it has been relayed to them, that it's not going back retroactively.
Okay.
It's from that date forward.
Forward, right, okay.
So,
So whatever they see right now, that's theirs, if they retired to,
What they
or
have
January
current.
2nd.
The money that they've put in, yes. The projection would change because the rate would be changing.
right, but for the most part, what it comes down to is if over the last 10 years, they've put away $20,000.
They still have
The 3-to-1 match, or 2-to-1 match, they're sitting on 60, right?
Kind of, yes.
And we change it this year, they're still sitting on 60. It's just that next year, when they start putting stuff in there, they're only getting the match for 1-to-1 moving forward.
We
for
can't
every dollar.
change it till 2018.
Well, I'm just saying,
And yes and no, and let me explain why. Because when the estimates are calculated, they're calculating to a certain age based on a certain contribution. So they will break out in the next estimate that goes to the employee after 2018 from, for example, me that I've been here since '05 to 17, this is what you had, this is what the contribution was, and here is the city's match. From 18 forward, now this is your projection.
correct,
So,
Correct.
yes.
right, yeah.
So if they retired January 2nd, whatever they saw, the
They still-
31st, that's theirs.
And just to be clear, this does not affect, should we consider this as one of our options, this does not affect their salary, their paycheck.
That is correct. It does not affect their paycheck or their contribution rate. The contribution rate would be the
That's the
same.
front versus the back end that I'm
Right.
talking about is.
And yet contribute to our general fund, the savings that the
The
city would.
savings would impact the general fund, like I mentioned, on a 1.5 to 1. The general fund would see a savings of $144,159, and on a 1 to 1, $259,781.
Can you say that number again, hon?
Yes, ma'am. On a 1 to 1.5, a savings in the general fund alone of $144,159. And on a 1 to 1 match, excuse me, a savings of $259,781.
Okay, thank you.
Now, will this go into the general fund and it's not restricted? Correct? I mean, it doesn't have to be restricted into any,
That would be the savings on personnel only in the general fund.
So
There
it
would
wouldn't,
be-
in other words, we
Yeah.
just wouldn't, it wouldn't be an expenditure anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So that would be a gain for.
but then those savings are not restricted. In other words, for example,
They
could
don't-
we use those and set them aside for capital outlay or
So it's not like an
infrastructure?
INS.
I think the goal of implementing this would be to try and reduce the deficit in the general fund.
But again, this budget does not, correct me if I'm wrong, does not have any capital outlay or infrastructure.
That is correct. There were
And
6
infrastructure is important. Two things for me is we continue with our infrastructure and that we contribute to our reserve fund. Because without continuing to improve our roads, it's hard to encourage economic development.
So one of the other things that we have been working on is we have gone through our entire chart of accounts, and we have been able to identify some funds that are not part of the budget. These are funds that have been created with specific purposes. We are trying to, and some of these funds go back several years. They have balances in them, and we are researching at this point how they were created, by ordinance or by council action. What the specifics of that action was for. In other words, if it was created by ordinance, were those monies specifically set aside for a certain purpose? And if that is the case, can it be deobligated to use those monies in other areas? One of the things that we are looking at is if we can, in fact, touch those funds, we would propose that the council start to look at those balances, those monies, to using toward street improvement and infrastructure. We don't have anything more concrete to give you all at this point because we're still doing that research, and we want to confirm with our city attorney before we bring it to you all that we do have all the correct information and proceed with whatever needs to be done to utilize those monies as to the best that we can for our residents.
You know, speaking of streets, Kingsville implements a street maintenance fee. Have we ever?
We have not.
Thought of that, or-
That is something that not only Kingsville does, I believe City of Corpus Christi does the same. And some of the bigger cities where there's more traffic. My understanding of a fee like that is it is done by ordinance, and it is usually included with probably the water bill. And just like the landfill development fund
Correct.
that was created, and we are setting aside those $4 for that specific purpose,
Correct.
whatever that fee would be set aside with the specific purpose of using it for whatever the council wished.
Because that's one of our main concerns is, and we understand our infrastructure and what's underneath streets needs to be addressed. But if we start maybe entertaining this idea, you know, a small increment that might, so that it's only for streets, because that's.
You may want to consider whatever that fee be is breaking it up between streets and infrastructure.
And infrastructure.
Because without your infrastructure
We can't
underneath
redo the
you,
street.
It's
there's no
inclusive.
sense
Your
in working on
infrastructure
your
is
street.
inclusive.
But it's like we're on this little spinning wheel, and we're like, well, we can't fix your street because your infrastructure needs work, and we don't have money for that. So council might want to entertain thinking of something like that, a minimal.
If that's something that
Something-
council would like to see, if you would you like us to propose different options?
Yes,
please.
I would.
And where would you like us to set this? Are you thinking like $1, 50 cents and 50
Well,
cents?
can
Or are
we
you
look at,
thinking
actually,
$4?
Kingsville uses a calculator. What is it? A user fee tier calculator. So it's like parking lot, and it has like businesses and parking lot size. I would think that we need to like research a little bit and see, you know.
I have no clue, so that I would look to y'all to get the
Okay.
proposals and give us an idea of it.
Okay.
I know that Kingsville, looking at the same thing, generated almost $1 million.
It was
What did they set it at?
906,879 annually.
Now they're
is
bigger
what
than
they
we are.
get.
So-
Annually?
Annually.
What's the fee set at?
Well, there's that tier, and
They
so
use
they
a
plug
tier.
in a tier, and then it just depends. I didn't research it that much. I'm just trying to grab for what's our main complaint: streets and infrastructure. So,
And some of the things we may need to consider is fine tuning it as we go. If the intent is to implement it, then start with a flat fee.
Right.
To give to give staff enough time to research
Right.
it, to see what would be in the best interest of everyone in the community.
how many water how many water bills do we
Accounts.
send out?
7,200?
7,200.
7,200.
Say times $1 would be what?
$7,200.
How many?
times
Times
Or
12.
times 12 times
times.
What's,
86,400.
just keeping in mind that we're not, I mean, we didn't increase taxes, so we definitely don't want to look at raising the utility bills,
Start gouging them with fees.
you know,
but-
Right.
and start impacting our citizens there to do this. So I would would like staff to run some scenarios that are minimal, just to get us
That's what I'm
started
even thinking, like,
experiencing,
a
just to
dollar.
experiment.
You know, $1 a month versus the increase that we had proposed at $5 a month, you know, $1 a month. And it's going towards something that they want, that our citizens want. They want good streets, and I don't blame them. I mean, we all want good streets. And it's important for, you know, business, for growth. So to me, if we started with even $1,
Sure. That in combination with what I had just mentioned, that we're trying to determine what those monies could be used for, could be a good way to start to fund those capital improvement projects.
And I think they just totally do a fund for that, and that's
Yes,
where
ma'am.
it
It would
goes,
be a
and that's all
restricted
they use
fund.
it for.
Designated
It's
funds.
designated specifically for that reason.
Because there's a lot of cost in our budget that go to little street repair. There was one that, there's street repairs that I guess just come up, Victor, probably, I guess, you know, that come up, and then we have to, I don't know, that was kind of a different one that I saw.
We do a lot of repairs
Okay,
with shovels.
before we
right
start
now.
Yeah,
going
I have a
all over the
question.
map.
You just said that. There's a lot of repairs with shovels. I see our employees with the caliche, and then I see the small hole. I
The
mean,
potholes.
Yeah, the potholes.
But, I mean,
They're
it's
filling them
not-
in.
The gravel, and then when it
Is-
rains, it goes away and you have the hole
Yeah, I
again.
mean, how, are we
Getting somewhere?
Are we getting somewhere? I mean, are we working harder or smarter? I'm not sure.
That's what I feel too.
I just feel like,
I go through a few parts and it's the same.
And if you'll allow
Well-
me a moment to defer your questions, because streets are
Okay.
not where I am.
I know,
That's
and
true, that's true.
Is
Sorry.
Mr. Sines
Sorry about
in the
that. That was my
audience?
fault, taking y'all out of there.
If he'd step up, maybe he can answer your
back there.
questions.
Victor,
Sorry, Diana.
tell
That's
us why
okay.
our employees are
I
feeling
can help you in
small
other
with
areas.
potholes
It's why we're a team.
versus.
Sorry, Victor. Dun, dun,
Thank you.
dun, dun.
Okay, what are your questions?
So we're just wondering, so when the employees are, and sometimes there's 3 of them, and they have the truck with the gravel, and there's little holes, and they'll go and just with a shovel go and fill them. And it's called a cold fill or
It's a cold mix, and we have 3 patching crews that have certain areas of the city, and that's what they do. They go and every area, every crew's got an area, and they do the patching.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So is there a better method? Because I see them like pretty much like every 2 weeks, like the same hole.
Normally, the cold mix will hold. It holds real good.
Effective.
Yeah, but our streets are in dire of repairs, so you can patch a street today, and in 2 or 3 weeks, they're gonna be back patching some more, especially after a rain.
You're not saying they're patching the same thing.
No, they're just coming up.
They're just coming down the same street because that
Yes,
street's
and
already
what
got problems.
happens, we go back to the infrastructure. Every time we have a water leak, well, guess what?
That's right.
It's in the street, and our crews have to go, and you might see them at the same spot, but they're doing street repairs or where repairing the water leaks on the streets. That happens a lot in the streets and alleys also.
So is there something that we could do instead of that would be cost effective, or have we researched that, or?
Well, one of the things would be, first, you gotta repair your infrastructure,
Yeah.
so we won't have that many water leaks where ties up our crews. And the second is, we need, our streets are in need
Just to
of
get
repairs.
redone?
Yeah. And
So-
I know seen a lot of streets here. For the last 3 or 4 years, we have not, seal coated or, we haven't had the
Been a
money.
long time.
For
And
3 or 4
we're
years.
working with a minimum, and we've cut down on staff. Public Works, we've lost a lot of employees, and that's part of cutting services.
Yeah.
Now, I know that a while back, that they presented to the previous council, it hasn't been presented to us yet, that they were looking to try to find $700,000 to do about, Rudy, was it 15 miles or 21 miles of chip and seal, and it was basically just two separate. I appreciate you coming forward. It was 2 separate sets of maintenance. It was probably for both of you guys. but
Stand there, yeah, don't go away.
Yeah. And I know this was presented a while back, but we were looking at $700 and something thousand to do. I want to say it was like 15 miles.
That's about right.
Yeah, about 15.6 miles or 21.6 miles. Those numbers, for some reason, resonate
Well,
with me, but.
In the city of Alice, there's somewhere around, I think it's about 110 miles of streets.
Okay.
Not all of them are in the same condition, as you can tell when you drive down these streets.
Correct.
There's 4 different methods you can do for this. You can do the chip seal, which is like Victor talked about, seal coat.
Yeah.
You can do a hot mix overlay, milling overlay, Basically, if the road surface isn't great, then you would mill up that surface and then put a new surface on, as long as the base or the structure below it is okay. The next method is a full depth reclamation. Now you take a milling machine and you mix the hot mix with the base, and in some cases you would add cement to strengthen that base section. On top of that, you would put the hot mix on top of that. The last method, which is most expensive, is a full reconstruct, basically taking everything down to the base, taking the hot mix, the base out, reworking the subgrade. Subgrade is basically natural soil.
What's going on? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Have we done an assessment to determine what streets need some of these methods?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have
Visually, yes, I have.
visually, but do we have a cost analysis and to determine, for example, certain streets only require the hot seal?
Yes,
Certain
absolutely.
streets, do we have some kind of report that we can? look
Yes,
at?
and like Mr. Crisp had mentioned, last council I presented during one of the city manager reports, delineating those streets. And what I tried to focus on was streets that hadn't been touched in the past 10 years that needed,
Prioritizing.
yes, prioritizing them.
Kind of
So-
like we did the water projects, you know, we did by need and, you know, I would like to see that and then start addressing. What's
it's a
going
good
on with
report.
Scott Street? Can you explain that one to me?
Scott Street, it's probably a street that wasn't completely constructed as far as our subdivision ordinance. That should have a curb and gutter out there as well. It does not.
Who's responsible for that?
I-
Developer?
Yes,
Was
the
it
developer.
developer?
Yes,
Then we
the
need to
developer.
hold them accountable. That's an embarrassment to our city, that street. It looks like you're in a county road, and they're paying their taxes. It infuriates me to see that. It's sad that
Yes,
they
it-
have this subdivision in our town, and it looks like that.
Yes, ma'am.
One
So
of
if
the,
if the developer needs to be held accountable, we need to make him accountable.
One of the reasons why the subdivision ordinance was brought to you all 2 meetings ago, in order for us to be able to hold individuals to what we expect of them, we need to have it outlined so that everyone understands what that responsibility is. No difference or variation from person to person.
Correct. But I would think that's in that old one, because there's some very exact things when it
Yes.
comes, it's only a subdivision. To me, when I read that one, it's not a business, it's only a subdivision, so I would feel that that's in there.
Yes.
I really think that that needs to be
There are
looked at.
several other areas that don't have curb and gutter, just so you know, in that area.
That road's not even done, Rudy.
I understand.
Like, it stops, and the sidewalk stop, like, it just stops.
But the
Like, that's
mayor's
not-
correct. Curb and gutter should have been part of the initial
And it is in that subdivision.
infrastructure.
It is in there.
When they submitted their plans.
And I
What
know it is
happened there?
because we talked to that business about it, and that's where I was like, well, hang on, Rudy, this is subdivision, so I know it's in there.
Curb and
can,
gutter
um,
definitely is.
We can, and you'll have to forgive me
How
again,
long
because
ago
I
was
don't
that?
know where.
Don't know.
How long ago was it? Because once they're out of there, it becomes the
It's-
city's
Yeah,
responsibility
they're
now.
gone. They're gone. I'll try to get them to do it.
I would imagine in the area of town where it is, it probably goes back. I don't think it's anything new, like maybe within the last 10
I mean,
years.
the only way to hold them to those standards would have been to.
Inspect and not-
To inspect and
and
hold
not let 'em
back
go, yeah.
any payments
Yeah.
at that time.
In reality, that street, it's a lot wider than a typical residential street.
Yeah. A couple of other questions,
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, ma'am, go for it.
For Victor, one, the patching crews, do they go out based on complaints that they receive, or how do they go about their assignments?
Maintenance construction, every time they do a water leak, we get an email and we dispatch them in the morning to certain, a lot of times we have to wait until there's compaction because they're still wet. And the rest of them, they have a certain area of town that they're dispatched to, and they stay in that crew on that area.
But they're dispatched based on what? Complaints received, or?
Yes, if we have complaints, yes, they get dispatched to complaints also.
Or or,
There-
I'm just trying to figure out
There are
the,
two processes, I would imagine, and Mr. Sines can, the first is any water leak that we are working on, that immediately we know that we need to send streets into that area. As complaints are coming through, those, depending on the complaint, get prioritized and moved to the top of the list. Also, he has his rotation, and that's what he's saying, right, Victor? You rotate them out
exactly.
throughout
have
the
a
city.
rotation schedule that you use, okay. I just wondered,
They have a really good
because I've seen them in
system.
some areas where, really, why are we there?
And he follows through with work orders, and sometimes it's difficult for the outside eyes to understand, well, why do you have them here and you're moving them all the way across town? It deals with different things, priorities, the amount of traffic that can be going through there. His crew and himself are very good at determining what needs to be done and when it needs to be done and how.
Okay, and one other question, and this may be for Rudy and Barbara. I haven't seen any community development block grants in quite a while. Those were very successful in addressing some of our older infrastructure in some of the areas of the city that needed upgrading. Was there a reason why we stopped doing CDBG grants? A lot of the improvements that were made on the south side were using CDBG grants, where we were able to upgrade our water and sewer lines and then do street improvements.
That's when Waldo Contu was still here. I think that was the last CDBG for infrastructure. And I don't know why we didn't have a capital improvement program, so perhaps there wasn't projects identified. I don't know. I don't know why we didn't pursue it. I know in the past year, we've sat down, engineering and I've sat down and worked with Joe Sines to identify the 2-inch water line replacement projects that are being done. And looking at those as possible CDBG project. The limit for this region to apply for CDBG is 300,000. So we were looking at, okay, what 2-inch water line replacement projects will be just right at 300,000. So we were looking at that. So that those projects are possible.
And
We started looking at it.
I highly encourage.
I understand where you're coming from, Ms. Moran, and you also have to understand that staff, some of the challenges that we've had to face is the constant changeover in management. So those insights and those focuses kind of fall from person to person as it's changing out. But we are working very hard at identifying collectively where we need to focus, and we will absolutely take that under advisement.
It's just, I seem to recall that the city always submitted an application for community development block grant funds during the cycles that they were available to apply for. I mean, we never missed an opportunity
That sounds like it
to
would always be in
submit.
place.
Yeah.
It'd just always be in place,
Yeah.
I would think.
I mean, whether we,
And
I mean, we were successful in doing a lot of projects out in the south side. That's something we certainly should look at
Yes,
to help
ma'am.
us with our infrastructure improvements.
Just always have it, and if you get a no, you get a no.
Yeah,
Oh, well.
exactly.
We gotta always
Absolutely.
try it.
Try for it.
Yeah. So I did notice that in our revenues, our grant revenue is
Most,
nothing.
Relatively.
It's 1,879
Well,
for 2017, am I correct in that?
Some-
We put that in different funds. A lot
Right.
of times, like the regular grants, there's on separate funds, and then
Okay.
just like money comes in, money goes out. So
Okay.
those are.
right.
Like the Border Star wouldn't even hit that, and that's $100,000 and stuff like that, so.
But so it would be in a different fund. But what I'm saying, our general fund, like,
That was probably just a minimal, I don't remember.
what would that have come
For
from, I
what?
wonder? Because that's my concern. If we're missing out on general fund grants, what can we do? Especially in our economic times right now, like, we got to do
Or
get
any
do
I
grants
something.
understand
that
where
are
you're going
out
from,
there.
and grants have been the forefront of several members of council, and here recently, again, we've been here less than 45
I
days
know.
in these
We
positions.
appreciate
We know,
that.
and we know
we're-
that,
we're,
the change of command
we're
and all that, we
doing
know.
all that we can to focus on that, and laying out plans for the future so that whoever does come into these roles, this role, can continue with that forward action.
Correct.
Yeah.
That 1879 was for a bulletproof vest grant.
The bullet-
Oh, so that's a
Actually,
police, okay.
Next year, we had wanted to separate it, but what we can do is, like during audit, we give them a list of all our grants and all
Yes.
the money.
Yeah.
Y'all can look at that and see how much money we actually do bring in.
That'd be
from
awesome.
grants.
That would be
That would be
great.
awesome. So
So
poor Miss
everything-
Barbara doesn't sit there going, yeah, but I did this and I
Yeah.
did that.
And this is.
And we know that, Miss Barbara. It's just, you know, we're
we
trying to
do.
pull at different ways we can.
And for us, it's just easier for audit
Yeah.
to have it totally separated from your operating funds.
Yeah.
And to see it just zero out.
And it's
So-
easier because we look at this, we're like, what? And I know that she worked on the airport one and got
I
money.
just want to
Yes,
make a
sir.
point to, that grants are an amazing tool for our city and that we
Right.
definitely can utilize them in projects and so forth. And for the people watching at home, we need to make clear that less than 1% of actual general fund revenues
Right.
can come from grants or does come from grants. That what we're talking about is projects and stuff like that can help offset. So we're not necessarily looking at trying to definitely eat away at our huge
Correct.
deficit, but it'll allow us to offer more services to the
Correct.
citizens is what we're doing here. So it's a great tool. We definitely need to
Right.
attack and get as much as we can get, but know that we still have a lot
Especially-
of
Right,
work
because
to
I
do.
keep thinking, this
No,
is
yeah.
wonderful discussion, but
Yes.
we.
Yeah,
we-
and this comment is in no way directed at
No.
Yeah.
at staff.
Oh, no,
This
not
is
at
just,
all.
again, we're going down some wish
Yeah.
lists and
Yes,
ways
and
to
that-
Because we
address
know
projects.
this budget does not have capital improvement.
Exactly.
So,
No, ma'am.
and we need to, as a city, look
We've
at that
got
and
to
not just say,
continue.
okay, well, we're just going to pay bills.
A-
That's a poor
again,
man's
and,
mentality, and I'm
um,
not okay with it.
We cannot,
The,
and we cannot,
We need to play the lottery.
Yes.
we've got to address how to rebuild our
Yes.
reserve funds
That's right.
and continue
Right.
with our infrastructure.
Not staying
improvements.
stagnant just because we just have to pay
So
bills.
what I'm hearing, and the goal of staff and the goal of council is, first goal was our debt, and we're
Yes.
good there.
Yes.
Okay,
Gonna
We
get
have
there.
to pay our
good.
we have to pay our
Second
bills.
goal is to work on replenishing reserves.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Third goal is to begin to fund these projects that have been neglected for some time and identify either through grants, through the chart of accounts that we are going through perhaps maybe a small fee to begin the process of identifying additional revenue streams to fund these capital improvement projects, which include infrastructure and streets. Is that correct?
Correct.
We're
And
all
you
on
had
the same
maintained
page.
service to
Yes.
citizens, and I think that you're exactly correct the way you
And-
did that. Debt, maintained services, replenishing and reserves, and then infrastructure needs, which we all know we need,
Yes, ma'am.
you know.
We are not at a point where these are wants.
That we need
I
them.
think what everything we're trying to convey to council is needs.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
Now, with that, I'd like to bring to council's attention that in order for us to provide these types of services as part of this capital improvement
you,
program
staff.
is equipment.
Correct. Yep.
Our staff cannot do a job if we have equipment that is constantly breaking down or is outdated.
Correct.
So that was part of the $6.1 million that was mentioned in the transmittal letter that we need to work toward as well. We are trying to do more with less, but we need to work smarter. And if that means investing in aging equipment, then it's something we will do. Rounding back to that, in order to be able to obtain lease purchases for fire trucks, for garbage trucks, for equipment that we need to operate, it is imperative that everyone keep at the forefront that general fund balance needs to be brought up. So we're having a wonderful discussion. We are identifying areas. We are looking at things. This is actually a very good session, so thank you all.
And I just thought I'd let y'all know, for fiscal year 16, we actually did bring in about 483,000 of grants. I mean, that
Awesome.
was grant money that the city used.
Perfect.
Say again, please.
$483,375.
Do you have what they went on?
Yeah, that's
Yes, like the
400.
Border Star grant, it was 83,729. We had a body worn camera program. We received 11,325. The airport had the aviation division, we received $231,542. Yes, we had night vision equipment from the police department. They received $40,696. They upgraded some of their portable radios. That was $59,092. The PD also received a video server. That was $38,851. They had is that police department?
Yeah.
The police department had a JAG grant. They received $13,284. Bulletproof vest, there's your $1,879. And then the EDA grant, there was a small part, $2,977.
2009-77. So it looks like PD's doing their homework, and they're bringing grants to Miss Barbara. Is that correct in saying that, or how? Because a lot of this is. What was the 83? What was the 83?
That was the Border Star. The
Port-
local border.
That's PD also.
It's PD.
It's
Yeah.
overtime for their,
Yeah, that's.
So it looks like aviation and the EDA were the only two.
The other ones.
Border
Well,
Star is a
usually fire gets a Homeland Security too.
Fire gets his
Fire
radios.
gets Homeland Security.
Uh-huh.
The 59,000 is actually the fire department.
It was fire,
Right.
I'm
Radios.
sorry.
Yeah.
They've gotten 3
Yeah,
cycles
I
of
got that, Chief.
Homeland Security for radios for fire department.
Uh-huh.
Border Star is state funds,
Mhm.
and that's a recurring funding cycle.
Okay.
And so we always apply for Border Star. And that is overtime, like you said, that's overtime for PD to do enhanced patrol.
Yeah. So we see how it's PD. So how can we? Going back to grants, I'm sorry, but
That's okay. I understand where you're coming from, and perhaps what we can do is, as we set the premise for future workshops, like we were talking about Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we set aside some time specifically to answer questions on grants. And that way we're
Barbara, I
not so
emailed you
focused
too.
on,
for grants, I emailed you 2. I sent you 2 emails. We have to work on
yes,
Wells
ma'am,
Fargo ASAP.
I received your emails on that, and I believe that the TDM grant is something we've already done, pre-hazard mitigation. Yeah, we've got that.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know, I just
Hazard.
forward everything, but the Wells Fargo has to be done, that is for sure money.
Okay.
So we can-
Community, the community improvement in
Yes.
Wells Fargo.
And she's
We-
for sure. So, but it's a time limit, so,
We'll be focusing on those.
thank you.
If we could, if y'all wouldn't mind, and I know there are a lot of questions, I'd like to just very quickly go to the revised budget, because it does have a little bit of a deficit, and I want to be able to convey to council how that came about.
Okay.
So I'm on, in your budget books, under the Roman numerals, it's page 19. And under the revised, you're going to notice a deficit consolidated of 572,877. So, geez, my speech teacher would be getting so upset with me right now because I keep using the so and the ums. So you'll have to forgive me, but we'll try our best here. That deficit, just like any budget, as much as we try to control expenditures, there's always things that come up that are unforeseen. Some of the things that came up with the revised budget include the purchasing of a server that is beyond important to the operations of the city. Our servers are very outdated, and here recently we have begun the process of upgrading our software. We need, with that process, need to upgrade our servers. Servers are not only for, the operations and utility billing and the operations of AP and payroll and HR and everything else, but also our email and storage, which is essential to being able to maintain records and pull information for information requests. That is a $65,000 expense that has to be done. There is also has been for about 2 years now, and I don't know, is Robert Guerra in the audience? Okay. So we've been working diligently on bringing landfill where it needs to be. And there are $75,000 in that revised budget to begin the process of chipping away at brush piles to bring them into more manageable, I guess, waste. And when Mr. Guerra is present at the workshop, you all can expand on those particulars. There is also some litigation that we are looking at, and there has been some money set aside for that. And a large portion of what happened with the revised budget deals with overtime at one of the general funds departments, and that is the fire department. There has been a lot of progress in wrapping our hands around the neck of the beast, so to speak. And in probably February, we began working very closely with Chief Van Nest and his command staff, his captains and lieutenants, and identifying the areas that we needed to be able to control overtime out there. The contractual components of our contract sometimes present challenges, but with those challenges comes the process of maintaining management rights, so to speak. We have implemented, and when I say we, I mean staff, not me for the fire department, but their staff, has implemented a change to their schedule. And with that schedule change, we are able to now quantify that instead of working the 24 on, 48 off, they are now working 48 hours and 72 off. 96, excuse me. That is helping to, and Chief, if you want to step up here, that would probably be helpful, because I might step into.
What was the 96?
It
96
is
off.
96 hours off,
So 2 days on and 4 days off.
4 days off.
That's the plan.
So Chief, if we do hire these additional, that overtime should be,
No.
No, we're not.
No.
Well,
are we
Unfortunately,
hiring this?
That goes away.
Cut.
Unfortunately,
I thought we were cutting just one position.
no, we're cutting
Three.
three.
Okay.
We're not cutting, we're just not
Not-
adding.
we're not
Adding,
adding.
adding
That
back.
is correct. These are not positions that were
We're gonna-
funded for
We're
this year.
hiring one.
For the fire department, it is two.
Okay.
Okay.
Two.
We wanted five.
We, unfortunately, the way it is set up, there is always overtime in the fire department.
Correct.
Okay? That animal will never go away. Is that animal manageable?
Manageable.
Yes. There are things that we have to do still to do it, and very simply, under the 28-day pay cycle, there's 26 hours of automatic overtime built in. We need to convert to an 18-day pay cycle, or pay period, or is that the correct term?
Overtime half cycle, so.
Overtime half cycle.
And yeah, we're getting into terms that, so for the
yeah.
benefit of the council, let me explain firefighter pay, because it is its own, little subject area. So for regular employee, anything in excess of 40 hours a week, everyone knows that you pay time and a half for.
Correct.
Okay. There are exemptions under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, when it comes to public safety. And for the fire department, it is, and police department actually as well, it's section 207K. What that says is that they set out tables that within so many work shifts, they set the threshold for overtime. We are currently using a 28-day cycle. That means that every 28 days, your threshold is put into play, and that is 212 hours. So anything in excess of 212 hours that is physically worked in that 28 days is paid at what is called a half-time rate. We call it overtime half. With the implementation of the 4896, in conjunction with that, we are anticipating and proposing that we move to an 18-day cycle. And that is to lower the threshold of automatic overtime that comes with the 28-day. I hope I didn't lose you all in that.
No.
But
What was the hours on that one again? The 18-day?
I believe it's one, is it one? I don't have it in front of me, 164, 168, I can't remember offhand.
Okay.
We have done a lot of research. We've run several scenarios. I've probably spent 22 hours just on that particular project, and I'm not joking. In addition to his command staff working very closely at looking at their policies and procedures and putting in some accountability when it came to individuals who are perhaps reaping a benefit that they shouldn't. We are starting to see an alleviation to that, and we are hopeful that with this last step, we will be able to manage that issue.
Very good.
So adding the 2 positions and filling the 1 current open position, again, will help that. And I'll say it this way, the other 3 positions would even help it further. But we understand there has to be some give and take here, and so we're willing to give, but we're not going to get rid of overtime.
No, we understand. I understand.
We're hopeful, and I'll say hopeful, and I'm going to throw out what I would consider a real projection, okay? And it's not going to match what's in the budget. I'm already going to tell you that. It's probably going to be, realistically, about $150,000.
Okay.
We would like to, historically, we've been down as low as 80. We can do it. We got some work to do, but it's full staffed. It's everything in place. Everything working together, everybody coming to work. No, we don't have long-term injuries. It's everything in place.
Correct.
Without that, that unfortunately, I'm going to say it's the wild card term. I can't tell you because I don't know how the cards are going to fall this year.
And one of the pluses that prior administration and council did was the quarterly review of budgets, and for everyone's education. Every month, the budget goes out to the department head and also to administration. And I think now more than ever, there needs to be a very watchful eye from administration and department heads. And when we met with department heads on, I believe it was Thursday that I called a special department head meeting, they need to take ownership of that budget. And if something isn't working, then instead of ignoring that issue, it needs to be addressed immediately, and we need to put our heads together to determine how we're going to alleviate it.
Correct.
If there is a solution to it. If not, then we need to get creative and be thinking outside the box of how we're going to determine and moving forward. So that in itself is why we have a deficit in the revised budget. It is not uncommon for there to be changes throughout the year. I do strongly believe that because of prior administration and prior councils looking at that quarterly amendment process, we were able to further fine-tune, and that deficit is not what it was in prior years. We are not, again, we are at that critical component where every single dollar matters.
Diane, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am,
Is
Mrs.
it
Garza.
true that the fire department is like 200,000 over for overtime?
They are
Close to
approximately
3.
about 280.
For overtime?
I want to say for overtime.
But you were short how many?
He was,
If we go back to prior years, last year we were unfunded 5 positions.
5 positions.
Okay, and then for the majority of the year, we've been long-term injuries, another 3,
2.
2 or 3, depending on how long, but, we've had 2 to 3 people out. So every one of those, somebody has to step up.
Correct.
And fill in, because we have the contractual requirement of 9 per shift. Okay? Anything, I have to go with the firefighter side of me here, anything less than 9 starts impacting
It's dangerous.
the quality of service that we provide, starts impacting safety of our personnel. So it's one of these challenges, again, got to give and take a little bit
Correct.
here. But if you paid attention to the fire in Kingsville, there was a lot of comments about the fact that Kingsville only had 7 firefighters. Okay, I'm not gonna sit down and say that we would end up with the same results and be any different because we have 9. I'm not gonna say that at all. It's just what you can do in those first few minutes. Fire departments, and people like to say fire departments have to be efficient. Fire departments have to be efficient and resilient, okay? But efficiency in the fire department isn't how many dollars we save. Really, it's about when we get on scene, and how many tasks can we accomplish, and how quickly can we accomplish those tasks.
How safely?
So you have to do a survey, you have to have 2 men on an attack line, you have to have people for ventilation, you have to have people to cut utilities, you have to have people do search and rescue, you know, and the National Fire Protection Association's recommendation for a residential structure fire is 15 people
That's right.
on scene in 8 minutes. Okay? We're not gonna meet that. We know that.
Yeah.
Okay? But that's what we're gonna be judged by. Something goes bad. So that's the standard we'll be judged by. We've done it all these years with 9 or less, yes. But anything less than what we have right now today changes what we do in the future and how we do it.
It has to be changed a lot, because I understand that 300,000 is a lot of money.
Yes,
I mean, a lot of overtime.
Yeah.
And I understand that it's poor management. That's what I know. It is poor management, and 300,000 of overtime, $300,000 is a lot
money.
We have already done those changes.
Well,
We-
it has to be
we've,
done, a lot more.
Yeah, we can bring back to council what I can do to show that it is making an impact is I will pull prior to the schedule change what was happening with overtime and what we've been able to see now, and how those scenarios are helping to alleviate some of it. And the command staff has been meeting every week, every Wednesday. They're going through their policies, their procedures in conjunction with the chief, and they're identifying those areas where we were perhaps a little exposed and closed that door on it.
So what Chief is saying is basically 150,000, which is almost cut in half, is what you're proposing.
That's, I had to say it's a guess.
Right.
I'm not even, you know, it's,
Just a
but
proposed-
hopefully it's an experience. Yeah.
That would be a half, but we can't risk public safety and lives
I'm not saying to
for
risk
money.
it, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, it's got to be cut.
We- and
They're not risking their lives for us.
What I'm,
No.
Yes, they are when they're shorthanded.
what I'm saying is.
You know for sure that they're.
Absolutely.
What
You should know
what
you're
I,
always there.
ma'am, what I am saying is we're already taking the steps to put those cuts in place.
Okay.
We're,
Make
Right.
sure that it's done.
Yes.
we're already moving that way, and we've been moving that way for several months. We're going to continue. There's some hard work still to be done,
Right.
you know, but it's gonna have to be, and we all understand it's done. But this is, the point is where the firefighters are taking the buy-in themselves,
Right.
identifying the problems and knowing what the problems are and coming up with the solutions. This is a classic example of labor and management working together to solve problems.
That's right.
And that's where we're going to continue to go. And I know Mr. Chris has been trying to get a question.
No, it's just a background question. The schedule before, and we're on 48 and 96 now, before it was,
24,
24,
48.
48.
And based on the way we've been working overtime, a firefighter would most likely work 48.
Anyway.
And have 24 off.
so historical is actually the opposite, basically.
Correct.
And now, worst case scenario is you will work 72 and you'll have 72 off. So we're trying to build in so firefighters are better rested,
Right.
okay? And things that we have to watch with this schedule going 2 days in a row, and one of the things that I'm concerned about is if we run into a busy spell and the numbers of fires and calls increase from the current level of where we're at, And then I start seeing injuries going up correspondingly with, because firefighters are, in essence, overworked again.
Absolutely.
So, this, and then we'll have to look at it again to see what is the best answer to fixing the problem. But historically, 2008, 2009, the city of Alice responded to almost 1,200 fire incidents. Okay, this year we're working just a little bit around the 400 or 500, 600 calls. So a drastic reduction in call volume, which is a good thing.
Right.
If you don't need me, I'm really happy.
Yeah.
I have questions.
Okay.
Chief, how many of these call-outs, or how much of this overtime of the 280 is outside city limits?
I know exactly where you're heading with this, and I was about to bring that up.
Thank you. And then I want you to tell me how much of your projection of the 150,000 is going to be outside city limits?
Or just a projection of, as a whole.
Best way out of that answer is, out of our whole budget, 60% of the budget is for inside the city. 40% is outside.
Okay.
You don't have that handy, the one that I asked
Okay,
you for?
40%.
I've got it somewhat memorized,
Yeah,
but I don't have it.
I asked the same
How,
question.
40% of that, how much of that is part, do we have any type of what I want to call interlocal agreements where,
That goes back to.
where we have some cooperation, where we get
We
some help?
have
Dates all the way back to 1960.
60,
To
Operation Cooperation between the city and the county.
Okay, tell
Is
me.
that ordinance?
No.
No.
I don't
it's
believe
just-
so. I think it's
how
just
does
an
that change?
Is
agreement.
that perpetual?
No, it's something that needs to be looked at,
Yes.
and I know exactly where you're coming from, because what is
1961?
essentially happening is your taxpayers within the city of Alice are bearing the,
Correct.
and I'm going to use the word burden, they're bearing the burden of funding a department that, and fire, police, public safety, are a big portion of our personnel budget. And they're responding to calls outside the city limits where the county taxpayers are not contributing
Correct.
in any way toward
I did
this.
speak to Judge with that, gosh, months ago, right, Chief? And what was his contribution? It was that tanker truck?
They bought a tanker truck.
We were able to secure $56,000 from the county this past year.
Dollars or a pumper truck?
Dollars.
Dollars.
Those dollars turned into
That's what they
a
chose
new
to
water
buy,
tank
yeah.
on a very old tanker. But it extended the life of the tanker out until,
That was my next question. Do we have depreciation that kicks in?
yeah, well.
I mean, there's a big difference between getting a pumper truck that depreciates versus getting some financial
Well,
monetary
he did get the
assistance.
monetary, and that's what he chose to do with it.
I turned it into,
Something that services them
And I'm
again.
not questioning your decision, Chief, to do
Well,
that.
That's
What
the
I'm
problem.
asking
It
is
went back to them.
Them.
monetary,
And believe me, we don't want to not fight fire
Yeah.
when they need to be fought. But
But we
it's
need some-
that is 40% of this year's budget for the fire department is $996,000.
nice.
put the new water tank on.
40% of the calls are being outside the city limits.
Outside the
so
city
it
limits.
makes it, you know.
Old truck.
That's the deficit for the year.
Most economical.
Right.
So,
We're going to address
some of
this
the
in
ways to address that, to address
Solutions.
that solution.
Because I did
is,
speak to Judge about it. He knows that I'm already on that.
Yeah,
Number
I'd
one,
like to talk
approaching
to the county and even the school district
Well,
to discuss some interlocal cooperation where all three entities will actually save money on certain things, like, for example, purchases, supplies, equipment. It's an outside-the-box thinking. It's a novel idea, but my research has shown that many communities who are in the same situations, economic situations that we are facing, are now turning to. Again, it's something that we need to explore.
We,
going back to the mayor's thing real quick, best I could do, Mayor, and best I recall, is I tried to do personnel cost and vehicle cost based on records. And we were only gonna come up with about $150,000.
That's what it was.
Okay, where if you take our current budget and you take 40% of our current budget, that's about $700-some thousand.
So-
Okay, we're gonna pay that budget to have that fire department, even if it doesn't go outside the city limits. So that's that trade-off again.
We understand.
What may need to be considered, in addition to approaching the county to discuss this, is perhaps, and Chief, you'll have to make sure I have my vernacular correct here, establishing a fee for residents in the county
Yeah.
to contribute toward this particular type of service.
And I had spoke to Judge about it and thought, okay, well, instead of imposing this huge chunk of money, how about every time we service you, you pay for the service?
That is probably
And that's
another
a
way
fair
to look at
enough
it.
thing, you know, if we service you, then pay us for it. And he didn't say no, you know, this was something that he felt, you know, we could revisit, versus a chunk, because he thought I was asking for a chunk of money. And I said, well, I would like it, but I want to be fair, you know, because the number we figured, or I wanted was a little,
That to me would have to involve fairness to the rest of the fire departments
Right.
in the county, because all the fire departments right now that service the county are getting basically the same treatment. You know, and
Some of those are volunteer.
it's just.
And I
but-
like the idea that Ms. Diana is bringing up, perhaps exploring the idea of a fire district where it doesn't impact, I mean, in all consideration to the county as well, where they don't have to come up with a large amount of money to pay in a lump sum at one time.
Okay.
We start creating, similar to the street maintenance fee, that we create a fire district where we have a nominal fee that builds up, and we can service all of the county's service areas, including the cities.
How would we
Outside the
charge?
city limits, those are known as emergency service
districts.
Okay.
districts. And those become taxing entities.
Okay?
And they're allowed to do up to 10 cents per 100, I believe.
Okay. Something to explore with the county so that we don't impact their budget as well.
And then that opens the door for us to contract with that emergency service district.
Yes.
how can we go about moving on
That
that?
has to be done by an election.
Has to be done by an
Let's
election.
look at it, though.
Well, May's coming up.
But that's
You're already
that's really
expending
a
monies on
county,
an election.
that's really a county thing. It's not, the city
Right, and
can't.
that's why I said, no, we would need to visit with, explore with the county what.
And create an emergency, what?
Service district.
Service
district.
district.
Oh, service district, that was the
Yes,
city.
fire
I've
district.
heard of fire
ESD.
districts.
Yeah, that's, it's the same thing.
So
Okay.
you've got that as a funding option. There are some other funding options out there. And, you know, even in the city, you could sit down, the same thing you're doing with the street fund. You could sit down and say emergency services, and it could help
Designate a fund for.
for the fire department, could help pay the EMS contribution, could help contribute to the police department.
That's
know,
right.
Chief, too, that I had brought up months ago, that we don't charge for these permit, when y'all go inspect a business.
Right, and
I
that's one
kept
of,
waiting to get charged when y'all inspect it. That was a lot of time, and
That's one of
be in
the
the fee,
fees that are
the
being
COs.
proposed is
they're
the
not
inspection
done.
fee, and then if there is need be a second inspection, a
Yeah.
re-inspection fee.
Yes.
But they're not currently
they're
in
not
effect.
currently in effect. Because I know I didn't get a bill, and I kept
Or
waiting
they're
for a
just
bill.
not
Should
being-
be.
They're not being,
They're
well,
not.
They're not being billed, probably.
One of the problems for the fire
Oh, they
department.
don't do that. They don't have collections.
One of the problems for us is fire marshal's office is a one-person deep
Yep.
thing.
It was
We
back
don't
to last.
have the ability to
It's your job.
bill and collect and do that stuff. We would have to burden another department.
Not necessarily. I think
No,
I might
that's
have some
billing.
Spending
suggestions
money is not a
there.
burden, Chief.
I
Let's
might have
collect.
some suggestions there for them to be able to keep track of that.
look forward to it.
There's possibilities, but I'm just saying, you know, some other department would have to become involved in that process. Right now,
That's
we-
that's
we-
building and permitting that should be looking at
And
these fees.
we'll work on again, one of the other issues and it seems
Yes,
like we're
please.
jumping all over the map, and you'll have to forgive me, but we're having very good conversation, so this is a good step in the right direction.
Just looking to
in
streamline and
streamlining the
save money rather
processes,
than
there have-
reduction in force.
There have been some thoughts on changing our structure, our organizational chart. And that's something that I'll be bringing to council
Yes.
with some recommendations that may make better sense logistically, number one. But number two, perhaps financially, in the breakdown, it seems to be between departments not being able to communicate with one another.
Correct.
We can centralize them under one umbrella, then it becomes, okay, this person is over this department has this responsibility, and it all flows upward to where it needs to go.
I think a very simple collections department would be a great thing to think about,
We-
because we do not collect. And I'm
We,
saying it
um,
again and again and again. We have
The
missed out.
responsibility for collections, what has happened through the years is that it has been, again, reductions in staff. You have to remember that with reductions in staff, sometimes key individuals have left, okay? It has become the responsibility of every department, but there has been
That doesn't work,
perhaps
Diana.
a failure of communication to that department to let them know the responsibility that is there for what they should be collecting.
I don't know. I don't think that works. I really feel that the community needs to know if they're going to pay a fee, this is where they go. Instead of, oh, do I go to fire department? Do I go to code, or do I go? I think we've missed a lot of revenue for the city. I know, no, I don't think. I know, because I've heard
and that's,
$7,000 check walk out the door. That is unacceptable.
That is areas that Mr. Ramos and I and Finance have been fine-tuning through, and I'm not going to disagree with you that there are areas of concern that need to be addressed. And it's not one department or other departments. It seems to be
It's
across
City of
the
Dallas
board.
as a whole.
Right.
Well,
You know, we have begun the process of looking at, first and foremost, the airport. And I'm going to put it out there that
Yes.
those individuals that were behind on collections, we
That's
have
right.
placed a lock on their doors.
yes.
That's a perfect example for years, and those people aren't even in town anymore.
The other
for years.
area is the golf course, and we are looking at that facility as well. We, in conjunction with inspections and codes, have gone to look through those processes, and they are fine-tuning those fees and those recommendations to bring to council.
See, here again, like the multi-use, how much was not collected? Like, it goes back to collections.
And I understand exactly where you're coming from.
Hundreds of
So
thousands of
we do
dollars.
have, I have 2 areas that I would like to see, and I don't know if it would be attainable this year, but I do think we need perhaps to look at a central purchasing area, number one, and a central collections area.
I think that's a great.
And again, those fall within my ideas of possibly working with the county and school for a interlocal agreement for what they call cooperative purchasing. Because when you have several agencies working together and purchasing, you tend to save more money rather than each department, you know, going out there and purchasing on their own. Again, this is not new to other cities who are struggling in the same situation as we are. They are looking at a cooperative purchasing.
It's regional cooperation at its best, and we'll start with county and school and city, and that's been our goal, you know, just to bring them. And I think we're doing a great
I
job.
actually was able to find a copy of the Operation Cooperation Agreement, and that's how the premise of the cost sharing with the airport came into play. And this is several years old, but it was a step in a forward direction that I think the goal of this council and staff is now to broaden that. It's not uncommon, like Ms. Moran said, for other communities to look at this. And if that means a simple paper purchase, everybody's got to use paper.
That's right.
And we
Supplies.
you know, supplies, pens, paper clips, those types of things.
That's
It's
a
a step
cost-saving
forward.
measure.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of momentum going forward, and you know, perhaps the city and the county and the school district collectively and collaboratively can work through these challenges for the betterment of the entire community.
Yeah, I just want to say that, again, every penny counts. And the concept is we need to start looking at streamlining and saving. And I want to commend you. I know you just stepped in this, to serve as our
And I'm still looking for a permanent placement.
interim manager, and also our finance director, who's only been here, what, Mr. Ramos, a month, 2 months?
A little over a month.
And I'm going to piggyback, if I may, Mayor, on your comments about, you all have identified that a lot of the deficiencies that we are facing have to do with management issues. And I would like for us to continue to set up some policies and procedures, and I like the idea of your quarterly reviews that you're doing.
And these are, it's an expansion of what prior management was already trying to accomplish.
Exactly. We're just
It
gonna
sometimes,
continue.
it sometimes may be unfair to say that there were management issues, because the issues that management was facing at that time was, how do you close a $5.4 million deficit in such a short amount of time? And that's something that collectively staff work through. And I do think it's important to stress that there were sacrifices that were made by staff. And because of those sacrifices, it has been challenging for them. Which is why I will, reiterate again that I do not want to, if we can, avoid touching personnel any further.
Right.
We are down to bare bones skeleton crews. We are down to individuals, taking on the roles of 2 or 3 positions, and they rise to that challenge every day. I know the perception from the public sometimes is, oh, that's a city worker, and city workers are overpaid, and city workers are lazy. That is a misconception. You have an abundance of city workers who are dedicated, who are here every day, all hours of the day and night. Our maintenance and construction crew, I don't know if the public understands that, but they went from a crew of 16 to a crew of 8. And they are keeping up as best as we can with every water leak, with every sewer call, 24 hours a day, if it's 105 degrees or if it's 5 degrees outside. These men are out there working. Our streets crews. I know a lot of emphasis is placed on public safety because they are such a critical component to the safety of our community. But I want to stress to the public that without the rest of those individuals, this community is not run. And I think that staff needs to be, they need to be recognized for that every day.
And we do, and I think we do as a council.
And I think the ideas that are being presented here by council, I don't think have touched or discussed having to do with any reduction in staff.
No.
I want to be clear, as far as I'm concerned, that's not where we're going. Mine is streamlining processes, savings, and not cutting staff. I do understand that we are and have done that in the past. Also, my comment about management is not meant to be taken in any negative connotation. What I'm stressing is that we must all be cognizant of the fact that we need to be looking at management practices that perhaps have not been in place, policies and procedures that need to be followed, those kind of things. I'm not directing that at any individual or entity.
Mayor, would it be possible to take just a small recess, since we've been going at this for almost 2 hours?
Absolutely.
Just to give staff a little break, and we can come back and focus on some of the other issues.
Okay. Yep, we'll take a little 5-minute recess.
It's about 5-10 minutes, just so. 5 minutes.
I took mine a few minutes ago.